Ryan Binkley is a Texas pastor, a businessman, and now a Republican candidate for President of the United States. I talk one-on-one with Ryan for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Ryan Binkley, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's great to be with you this morning.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Finished up here in a meeting in Columbia, South Carolina. So it's been great to be with you guys here. So glad to be with you.
Yes, sir. You're just 2 hours away from us here in Charleston. I know that you are the president and CEO of the Generational Group located in Richardson, Texas, with over 300 employees. Your generational focus is on business consultancy, M&A, wealth advisory for business owners throughout North America. And of course, you and your wife are the founders of Create Church, a multi-ethnic, multi-generational church in Richardson, Texas. And now I understand that you are a GOP presidential candidate for 2024. So tell me, Ryan, with all your experience and background, why President of the United States? Why now?
Wow. Well, I think for the last 30 years, I've been a student of finance and the economy, and just seeing our country go to a place that, it's in a really unhealthy spot for the next generation. And really for all of us, you may know this, but the wealth gap has gotten bigger and bigger. We have 50% of young people under 25 living with their parents because they can't afford rent. The job market's tough, but more importantly, the U.S. dollar is really being damaged a lot because we've done deficit spending for 30 years. We've only balanced the budget one time. So I have a message of economic security, how to get back towards a balanced budget, how to save the U.S. dollar. And then more importantly, culturally, how do we unite our country? We're so divided that really it's the goal of each party to see the other party fail. So I'm speaking instead, let's see America succeed. And I'm speaking to this points of debt and division. How do we rescue our country and the heart of our nation back? And that's why I'm running.
Let me talk to you about balancing the budget. And you mentioned obviously about the deficit and whatnot. So for instance, all spending would need to be cut by roughly what if you were to become president?
It's an interesting topic. We have to understand, first of all, what causes inflation today and really communicate well to American people about how important it is we get off the deficit spending addiction that we're on. So usually, from modern economic theory means that you use deficit spending to try and spur the economy, come out of a recession. But we do it every year, whether we're in a recession or not. So we just keep doing it year after year. And the reason is because politicians are trying to buy votes. So once I can communicate to America what we're actually doing, what's the damage of it doing to your financial security, then I think America would have the incentive to say, okay, hey, let's stop doing this. Because if we don't do it for the next generation, they're going to be in trouble. So where you have to start is your biggest expenses. So our biggest expense in the United States of America is healthcare. We spend 4.5 times as much on healthcare as we do the military. So it's that big and it's really inefficient. So I would start right there, coming up with price efficiencies, price transparencies, getting patients involved in shopping again. We have a socialized system today filled with monopolies from big pharma to insurance. And so I break up all those monopolies, create competition, and create the opportunity for cost and waste to get it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And yes, sir. And I lost you there for a second. But let me ask you, how much has inflation taken the deficit to?
Well, right now, the deficit is $2 trillion a year. We have $34 trillion in debt and no plan to pay it back. So we're in the next 5 or 6 years, we're probably going to be $50 trillion in debt. At that time, the interest payments alone will be twice as much as the military. Twice as much. And so I think in 4 or 5 short years, we're on an unsustainable path. So I'm over here shouting, does anybody see this? And right now, we just have politicians just trying to get elected, so they're not talking about it.
Well, how would the necessary cuts grow if the defense, veterans, and Social Security and Medicaid spending were actually off the table, Ryan?
It starts with healthcare, as I said earlier. So, there's so much inefficiency in the system that we can actually provide quality care without having just a system of monopolies. Now, it would take a restructure of the healthcare system. But when you understand how much waste is there, it's unbelievable. So you start there, and I think we can start cutting 5 or 10% out of healthcare every single year. Our goal is to balance the budget in 7 years. So it's not going to happen overnight, but it's a realistic target. And if we don't shoot for something, it'll never happen. So We can still grow the country. I do think we have to look at non-defense discretionary spending, which is still 25% of our U.S. economy as far as what the government is spending. So there's all these pet projects. It's 25% of federal spending. We can start cutting that back 5% a year or so. And with healthcare and non-defense discretionary, we can get there in about 5-7 years.
What pet projects would you cut right now if you could?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, healthcare is the number one, and then everything else just needs to come down. So when I'm talking about non-defense discretionary spending, this is everything. These are the 15 major departments in the government, right, which is the fastest growing employer. You know, at the end of the day, I don't want the fastest growing employer in the United States to be the federal government. So we've just been in this habit of doing things the way we've been doing it for 30 years. We just got to get out of the habit of it. We have to make sure it's efficient. We have to go through every job like I would if I was doing a complete restructure in a corporation, find out which jobs are truly needed, get rid of the ones that truly aren't needed, become more efficient at it. And, we can cut the federal spending by 10%. I mean, as far as that aspect of the government, it's just going to take hard work, but we have to do it because we're borrowing money. We do not have the money to keep doing what we're doing. And when you tell America this, listen, we can't keep doing this. I mean, the result of it is this. We have 30% higher rents, 30% higher food, 30% higher energy costs. And you know what hasn't gone up is wages. Wages are nowhere near that amount. And so when this happens, you end up going bankrupt, and that's where we're headed.
What are the typical wages right now?
Right now in America, to average household income, if that's what you're referring to, is maybe around $80,000 a year. The challenge is that, a young person coming out of college, with a normal job today, they can't afford rent. They can't afford a car. They have to get 4 and 5 roommates or go live with their parents. And so if you're a young person and your goal is financial independence, it's really, it's only a small portion of America that's going to be able to fulfill that dream. So we have to tell young people today that, it's not always been this way. When I was growing up and I graduated college in 1990, at the end of the day, I had an apartment, I had a car, I had room left over at the end of the month, and I didn't have any roommates, and that I could afford it. My apartment was $400 a month. Today, that same apartment is $2,000 a month. So housing has gone up 500% since 1990, but the average income's only gone up about 100%. So the reality is this: wages aren't keeping up with this deficit spending we're on. So there's no plan out. So you have to start cutting back the unnecessary costs. You have to start getting us back on track.
Now, cutting those jobs you mentioned that you talked about in the federal government, what jobs are really necessary right now? Which jobs did you actually eliminate?
Well, I think they're all necessary. We just don't need as many of them. So, you have to go through it. When you got tens of thousands of employees, right, or hundreds of thousands of employees in the federal government, you just got to learn to be efficient, just like any other company. When a company goes through a major restructure, you may know this, but if you look at any major company that goes through a restructure, what happens? They end up laying off 10, 15% of employees. I mean, Citigroup's laying off 20,000 employees in the next 2 years. They just unloaded another division that had 40,000 employees. So what are they doing? They're trying to become more efficient. Now, they're a major bank in the United States, and so they're still going to be around. But what happens to their stock when they do this? Their stock price goes up. And that's what's going to happen to America. People are going to go find other jobs in other places. So just because you lose the job doesn't mean you're never going to work again. I mean, if you lost your job, I hope you keep looking for another one, right? So there's other jobs.
This past summer.
It's not like there's just no more jobs. I mean, you can create jobs. You can go to work for yourself. You can do service-based jobs. You can go to work for another company, one that's growing and one that's more efficient than it's needed.
Which one of these jobs are actually trending right now? And which one would actually help America right now, Ryan?
Well, when you look at America today, we've changed a lot over the last 100 years. So, we started off as a very agricultural-based society. A lot of jobs were in agriculture. Then it shifted to manufacturing, in the 50s, 40s through the 70s. And now it's service-based jobs. And so a lot of jobs out there are service-based, whether that be in technology or whether that be even in home construction or electrical engineering or computer-based jobs. And so there's so many jobs, but service-based jobs is what's really happening right now. So I would tell people to focus on those.
Now, what type of housing bill would you put forth to send to Congress to help with this housing situation right now?
So what would I do in Congress about the housing situation?
Yeah, what bill would you send to Congress to help with the housing situation?
The big problem with housing today is just it's not affordable. So, when you start thinking about a bill, what can you really do about it? Well, the main thing you got to do about it is you have to cut spending. You have to make it more affordable. We've got to get the government out of our everyday life. The government's not supposed to be involved in everyday decisions. They've gotten too big and too much a part of it. So I would try and get the government out, but I would try and get the government to do what they're supposed to do, which is be efficient and get out of the way. And if they do, housing would be affordable because you'd have more competition in it. It'd be affordable to be able to get a loan today. I bought my first house when I was about 27 years old, and I was able to put 10% down. That house cost $110,000, and that was in mid 90s. Today that house would be $450,000, and so it'd be out of reach for somebody in their mid 20s today, likely. So this is what government's done. It's gotten too much involved in everyday life, spending too much money, really trying to buy votes is what they're doing. So whenever the government's buying votes by, like, say, college tuition, what they're doing is they're trying to buy the college tuition vote, the college votes with their tuition. So when you start to see what they're doing, get them out of the way, have them be efficient, focus on what they're supposed to do, and then jobs will come back and housing will be more affordable.
Well, how much, if you take that tuition away, how much would that save the average? How much would that save the government, I should say?
Oh my goodness! So it's hundreds of billions of dollars that the federal government's doing right now, and the challenge with it is that in order to be fair, so to speak, you have to do it every single year. So if you don't do it every single year, then you're not really being fair, right? But if you do it every single year, you're adding trillions of dollars in deficit to our country over time, and that's going to just continue to exacerbate inflation.
Wow. And I want to quickly get back over to healthcare. I know you want to reform healthcare in one of the interviews that you told, I believe, WYFF. So let me ask you this. How would you allow Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices?
Well, at the end of the day, letting free markets works. So the problem with drug prices today is that the United States government gives patent extensions to Big Pharma today that no other country does. So we do something that no other nation does. So, for instance, when a company comes up with a new drug, us, Germany, Canada, everybody will give them about a 15-year, patent protection, maybe 20 years. But what America does that no other nation does is that when that 20 years is up and they come up with a small improvement to it, we'll give them another 5 years, another 10 years. And so they do what's called patent hedging. And so they'll come up with a small upgrade and we'll give them patent protection for another 10 or 15 years, and no other nation does that. So that's why we end up paying 2 to 3 times as much over time that other countries do, because we give this. Now, what they do for us in return, they give politicians money, and politicians use that money to buy campaigns and to buy votes with. So it's a circle of corruption is what it is. And we just got to be fair. We got to be fair. We have to be able to buy prices. I would recommend that we stop the patent protection beyond what other countries do. We actually allow anybody to buy drugs from other nations. I mean, why can't we buy drugs from Canada, other places? We should not have to just buy them from the United States of America.
So if you buy those drugs from Canada, how much would that cost the administration, your administration?
I mean, it's going to be cheaper. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot cheaper than what they are today. Right now, we're bought off. And the way to fix this is truly have patent reform that's correct and that's parallel as every other nation, because what we're doing, we're actually subsidizing pharmaceutical drugs to the globe right now. So we're subsidizing Canada, we're subsidizing Germany, we're subsidizing Japan. We shouldn't be doing that.
Now, how much money is the United States currently sending to these companies with this patent protection that you just mentioned?
Well, it's all in our Medicare, Medicaid, and everything, all the drugs that we're supporting. So the U.S. government spends $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare. So that we spend 4 times as much on healthcare as we do the military. So and drugs are probably about 8 to 10% of healthcare. So if you just kind of look at the math on that, it's $500 billion a year. We spend twice as much as any other company in the world, 3 times as much. So we could save a few $100 billion a year just off patent reform alone.
So where would you shift that money to?
To you and me, and to the patient itself, and to the consumer. So it ends up being cheaper prices, which means cheaper insurance, which means cheaper, basically more efficient costs, less money going out to the government. So we can balance our budget, because right now healthcare inflation is 40% higher than regular inflation for the last 20 years. So when you have inflation that's gone up in this industry, but we're not addressing the true causes of it, this is what happens. So you can use that money to use other things with.
What are those other causes that you want to address?
There's just the entire budget deficit has got to be addressed. But I think it can be addressed little by little. It's not like you have to do it overnight. So on average, we spend 20% more than we bring in. There's some tax reform that we need. We give big tech and we give big pharma tax rebates, and we give to another few $100 billion. So there's more income streams we can have by literally charging them fair amounts. And the Republican Party's made this mistake too. We've done this. For instance, I'm a small business owner. Any company that's less than 500 employees is designated as a small business. We pay 21% tax rates, but Amazon pays about 6%. Big tech, maybe 5-7% on average. So we have to even the playing field. There's no way Amazon, they made $23 billion, and last year they only paid 6% in taxes. That's not fair. So once we improve the tax system as well, charge big tech and big healthcare, big pharma the same rate as everybody else, that'll raise the income levels in America as well. So it's not just it's
Right.
be a fair tax system as well.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, Ryan Binkley, who's the GOP presidential candidate for 2024, thank you for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Tell people to go to Binkley2024.com. Check us out. Thank you.
Thank you.